Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Hannaford, a politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, March the 26th. In a week's time or so, it will be Easter, when many Canadians reflect on the death of Jesus Christ in Jerusalem and how his resurrection from the dead made possible the same ascension for anybody who places their trust in him. But one of the ironies of life in the Holy Land today is that there are fewer and fewer Christians walking where Christ walked 2,000 years ago, calling people to repentance and that reconciliation with God. That is to say that 100 years ago, about 10% of the people living in that whole area of Israel, West Bank, and Gaza were Christians. Now, there are more Palestinian Christians living outside the area than in it. There may be perhaps 400 Christians left in Gaza. Who really knows for sure? Bethlehem is virtually a Christian-free zone. And in the West Bank, Israeli settlers in the last couple of weeks have been attacking Palestinian Christians. What has happened? What is the outlook for these people? With me tonight is John Naim Snowbar. He is the Director of Advocacy for Palestinian Christians in Australia. He's also the first grandson of the first Palestinian Anglican Bishop of Jerusalem, and until recently was a member of the Australian Diplomatic Corps. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Nigel.
John, so many questions. Have I overstated the situation of despair for Middle Eastern Christians?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's important to situate where Middle Eastern Christians sit in terms of world Christianity. Firstly, to say that Palestinian Christians are the first Christians. It is from them that the gospel came, and it is through them and the Palestinian Christian, who were at that point Palestinian Jewish apostles of Christ, that Christianity came to the world long before Rome became Christian, and certainly long before America, Canada, and Australia became Christian. Their situation is a particularly terrible one, particularly in the Holy Land where Christ once walked. Palestinian Christians face settler attacks almost daily, around 10 a day. Palestinian Christians are unable to access the holy sites, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They are unable to pray, much like their Palestinian Muslim brothers and sisters. Their homes are attacked regularly, demolished by settlers, and many of them languish in Israeli prisons. The situation, sadly, is not as bad, but still quite terrible for Christians in the Middle East more broadly. I'll mention, for instance, before the Iraq War, Iraq had a vibrant community of over 1 million Christians, and now has just a fraction of that. So the situation for Christians in the Middle East, but particularly in the Holy Land, is a terrible one, and requires and deserves the attention that you're giving it.
Now, John, let me ask you this. To a casual observer, it seems that Christians in North America, the United States, and Canada are broadly sympathetic to Israel, to the Jews. Why do you think the Jews are not reciprocating with the Christians who live among them? What's this about? Land or money or loyalties? What's going on?
Well, it's a complex history, as you would know, Nigel. I think that what is going on is that the Western Church has decided not to see not to see Christianity and the faith through the eyes of the living stones of Christianity itself. The Western Church has decided to align itself really with a particular ideology, a dangerous ideology in Christian Zionism, that really practices the theology of supremacy over the theology of tolerance and over the theology of compassion and mercy. And you see that being intertwined really in a entire infrastructure in American evangelism that is grounded in an expansionist worldview that seeks to replace theology with foreign policy, something that I saw very much firsthand as an Australian diplomat, where I served in Egypt and in Pakistan. And even in Australia, that was something that was influencing Australian foreign policy and indeed influences Western diplomats all over. So what you have is a wrong framing, if you like, of Christianity itself, a framing that sees God as a real estate agent that hands out land to one group of people but not another, and that really misplaces the message of the gospel.
Well, that, of course, to a cynic, and I am not a cynic, but to a cynic, that might seem like a reading of the book of Joshua, very much a handing out of land. But what you're talking about there is some kind of liberation theology, and I understand what that's about. But for the benefit of people who we've only got 20 minutes, for the benefit of people who want to cut to the chase, what do the Christians in that part of the world want? Do they want their own little piece of sovereign territory? Is that the game?
Well, I think I can speak for Palestinian Christians, and in that way, I also speak for Palestinians more broadly, including Palestinian Muslims. What they want is not a religious state. They want to live in a pluralistic civil society that allows them to practice their own religion, something that they're not able to do currently under the auspices of the State of Israel, which is they've not been able to do that for the last 76 years. And that is something that they hold dear. They want the right to raise their children safely, to raise their children in a way that they're equal with other children, regardless of where they live or how long their ancestors had been there. I myself am lucky enough to live in Australia, a country that I was proud to serve as a diplomat in, where I am treated equally in front of the law, regardless of how long my parents have been here and how long my family has been here. And I think that's a common and shared desire that Christians in the Middle East have with people in the West. It is a desire to live a free, safe, and secure life with rights to be citizens and to exercise political and economic rights.
Well, let me push you a little on that. Within the borders of Israel, and I'm not including the West Bank here, which obviously is a contentious point for anybody who believes in that Christian Zionist message that you were speaking of. But for those who live within the accepted borders of Israel, more than 1 million of them, I do believe, are Palestinians. They are Arabs. They are not Jews. They prefer to be there. Sorry, am I wrong on a point of fact?
I think all Palestinians prefer to be in the Holy Land, in Palestine or the State of Israel. All Palestinians wish to have a connection with the land in which their ancestors walked, in which the Lord, when he was here in human flesh, walked. And so you'd be right in saying that there are Christians who live in the State of Israel who are Palestinian and who are able to live there as citizens, although they
Okay,
don't
that's actually where I
exercise.
was going with this, John.
Yeah.
If the Muslims can get along in Israel, why can't the Christians?
Well, I think the issue really is about an apartheid system. So you've asked me a question about the people that live within the state of Israel. However, there are millions of Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims who live in the occupied West Bank. Or in Gaza, or indeed in the hundreds of refugee camps that are spotted around that region that house Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims. And none of them have the rights that are extended to citizens of the state of Israel. None of them can practice their religion freely or can move freely or, in fact, are even documented.
The government of the West Bank would be for those who live in the West Bank, which is Would it not be the Palestinian Authority that they would appeal to?
Well, they would appeal to a broad political consensus among the Palestinian people that the only body that truly represents the Palestinians is the PLO, and and that is a broad consensus within the Palestinian national movement. And the Palestinian Authority, of course, arose out of a much later set of agreements that were done. And so many Palestinians would feel that the Palestinian Authority does not represent them.
Well, I'm sure they would feel that, but in terms of actually living out your life day to day, being free to worship in particular, is the Palestinian Authority actively against them?
I think it's important to put things into context. So, what is happening in the occupied West Bank is that many Palestinians live under the thumb of Israeli occupation. Israeli occupation is administered by a department of the Israeli state called Kogat. Kogat administers the ability to move, the ability to move, to work, to have work rights. And so it really is the state of Israel that exercises a system of domination and control over Christians and Muslim Palestinians. And really, it sits with the state of Israel as the occupying power to remove those restrictions in order to allow Palestinians to live freely.
What would that actually? What are they not able to do when if you never mind elsewhere, but in the West Bank, what are they not able to do that is
Well,
specifically prohibited by the government of Israel?
Well, let's take freedom of movement, for instance. They're unable to move freely. Palestinians living in Bethlehem are unable to move and go to Jerusalem without a permit, without direct permission by the state of Israel. They're unable to access economic opportunities. Many Palestinians in the West Bank are unable to travel to their ancestral homes in what was once Palestine, what is now termed the State of Israel. And so, just taking freedom of movement, you can imagine the sort of restrictions that that places on people, being unable to reunite with families, being unable to access properties that were taken under the Israeli Absentee Act. Right after the state of Israel was formed, being unable to access, in some cases, medical services, in some cases, being unable to study, being unable to reach universities, taking vast amounts of time to get between town and town, between city and city. Even small villages are unable to access one another. There are villages and cities that are completely surrounded by Israeli settlements where there are roads that can be used by Israeli Jews that are not allowed to be used by Palestinians. So even just taking that as one small example, and indeed it's a large example, Palestinians are really living under the thumb of a brutal occupation.
Well, okay. The Israelis, if they were here on this program to speak for themselves, would probably say, well, to the extent that what you're saying is true, John, we just got tired of people wandering across borders wearing suicide vests and taking the bus and taking everybody on the bus with them. So, of course, we introduced restrictions and built the walls and had the permit system. But nevertheless, there are more than a million people who are not Jews living within Israel, and they're not having to go home every night across the border. They just stay there. They're citizens. They kind of like it that way. So, because they got blown up as well. So, do you not concede that the state of Israel had some legitimate reason to be careful who they let in?
The core of the problem really is the proposition of creating a Jewish country in a non-Jewish majority country. And so the core of the issue from a Palestinian perspective is that if you are to create a state which is an exclusively Jewish state in a country that had a 90% plus non-Jewish population, that would necessitate the expulsion and indeed, as we've seen the International Court of Justice term recently, a genocide and plausible case of genocide against the inhabitants that live there that aren't Jewish. And so I think it's important to put that context around your question because
Yeah, well, to that point, genocide, I mean, the Jews know a little bit about genocide, so, but I don't think they're running concentration camps. So the courts may well have said that. I don't recall the details. I'm relying on you for the facts in this case. But if that's what they said, that was a rather imaginative use of language, most of us would say. And you say?
Well, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in Gaza, mainly women and children. Nearly 2 million have been displaced. There's been a total destruction of infrastructure, including of the Al Ahli Arab Hospital, which my grandfather brought under the auspices of the Diocese of Jerusalem when he was Bishop of Jerusalem. There is genocide that's been confirmed by the International Court of Justice. There is systematic torture and sexual violence, arbitrary detention. I mean, all of these things are well documented by many international bodies, including the United Nations, Amnesty International, other groups. And so what you are experiencing as a Palestinian living in the borders of the ever expanding state of Israel is a complete system of domination and control. Israel's 2018 nation state law codifies apartheid and Jewish supremacy. And so Jewish rights are not the same as non-Jewish rights. And of course, that's to be expected in a country where you hope to establish a Jewish character in a country that didn't originally have a Jewish character. And so its emblems, its flag, its national symbols, its parliament are all Jewish. And for that reason, the Palestinians are excluded because they are not Jewish. Some of them are,
John,
the vast majority.
You 10 seconds ago, you said something that probably has people say, huh? And that what you said, in a country that never had a Jewish character. Well, of course, Israel did have a Jewish character. We began the program by talking about the person of Christ and the situation that he found himself when the Jews were under Roman domination, but they were a nation. And
of course, and that is a history that I, as a Palestinian Christian descendant of Nazarene Jews, am proud of. I never said that Palestine did not have a Jewish history. Of course, there's been a continuous Jewish history in that land, but it does not serve to extinguish all the other histories that exist there. One claim cannot serve to extinguish the rest.
We're coming to we don't have an awful lot of time left, so I've got two questions. One is, what is it? You are the representative in Australia. Do you have direct links in that area of the Levant at the moment? By whatever name
Absolutely.
you want. Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you ever get there?
I was due to be there in May this year.
Yes.
However, since the Israeli and US assault on Iran and the flights situation, I'm reassessing that. But I do get there, and I'm hoping, in fact, to be there this May.
What do you, when you go, what is your purpose? Encouragement? Do you bring resources? What is your role?
Well, I wear another hat, and that is that I'm a theologian in training at Bethlehem Bible College at present. So this particular trip, my hope was really to attend the church at the sorry, I beg your pardon, the Christ at the Checkpoint conference happening in Bethlehem this year, which is a conference of Palestinian Christian theologians that brings together Christians ecumenically. And so my hope was really to connect with some of the theologians and some of the lecturers and some of the Palestinian leaders there to continue my studies.
So the last question then is, what does success look like? If you had the power to do it and you did it, what would you do?
Well, we would not have a religious state. We would have a civil, pluralistic, democratic state with full sovereign rights over borders and water and airspace, and we would dismantle the apartheid system that currently affects Palestine, and which some people call the State of Israel. There would be a right of return for all Palestinian refugees that have been displaced either in 1948 or 1967. For me personally, and speaking as a Christian, I would like to see a faith-based stance, something that speaks truth to power, and that's a truth about the history of anti-Semitism, a vile history that occurred in the West to non-Palestinian Jews, but also alongside that, a history of what happened to the Palestinians who paid the ultimate price for that anti-Semitism.
Just to be clear, on the borders of this, what would be the borders of this entity?
Well, Palestinians unfortunately don't have, we're not in a present position to be able to negotiate that.
No, this is the perfect world. I'm asking you to just blue sky here and say, if you could make it right, this non-sectarian state that you describe, what would be the borders? Would it include Gaza? Would it include West Bank? Would it include parts of Lebanon? You know, how big is the area that would be in a perfect world would be this homeland for everybody?
Well, in a perfect world, I think you would have to also take into account the reality. And the reality of that question is that a border change to Palestine, Israel will probably result in a border change to the region. And so I think the question really needs to be looked at holistically in terms of some of the other issues that are affecting the region as well. So I don't have an answer for you that I can say, well, it should be from here to here. But realistically speaking, Palestinians were expelled from the entirety of historic Palestine, and most Palestinian Christians would feel that it is their right to return to that whole area.
Okay, this is definitely the last question. I hope it lends itself to a short answer. When you return to the area in May, if in fact you are able to do so, do you expect to be able to worship with other Palestinian Christians in either the West Bank or in Israel, wherever it is that you're landing up?
I would hope so. Although I note that this coming week, with the beginning of Holy Week, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been closed by the State of Israel, as has the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They have been closed since the Israeli and US war on Iran. And so I would hope that the region is settled down and that I will be able to pray with my brothers and sisters.
Well, I hope that for you too, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program. I don't think we could take several hours and not get to the bottom of it, but you have certainly offered us some insights from a point of view that we don't often hear. Thank you again for that from Perth, Australia.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Thanks for having me.
For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.